The next one ready for voting is L29, promoting reconciliation, accountability and human rights in Sri Lanka. I will give the floor to the distinguished representative of the USA to introduce the draft proposal. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the core group, I am pleased to propose Resolution L29 entitled Promoting Reconciliation, Accountability, and Human Rights in Sri Lanka. This resolution seeks to support Sri Lanka's path to a lasting peace, built on a foundation of justice and accountability. We urge all the member states to join the co-sponsors. We have witnessed important changes in Sri Lanka since January, which have made today's consultative, constructive resolution possible. The goal of this resolution and of our efforts here in Geneva is to help Sri Lanka undertake a difficult but essential journey. And we welcome that this resolution recognizes the critical role of continued OHCHR engagement. As Secretary Kerry reiterated last week, the United States will remain steadfast in supporting justice, promoting reconciliation, and seeking an enduring peace and prosperity for all Sri Lankans. We will continue to work bilaterally and multilaterally to support all Sri Lankan people in their efforts to achieve a Sri Lanka that is peaceful, democratic, prosperous, and realizes the full potential of all its citizens. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I have been informed by the Secretariat that there are 25 additional co-sponsors. I now open the floor for members of the Council to make general comments. See, was distinguished representative next to Denmark? Montenegro was the first I saw. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. As a member of the core group, Montenegro lends its full support to the resolution on promoting reconciliation, accountability and human rights in Sri Lanka. This resolution comes in a historically important momentum as the new government of Sri Lanka has expressed its commitment to break with the remnants of the conflict past. We believe that it is an imperative for the international community to support Sri Lanka on this path, including by adopting this resolution by consensus. Montenegrin participation in the core group has been led by a clear motive to share the experience of belonging to a region that faced inter-ethnic conflicts in the 90s. Being aware that post-conflict states are fragile due to the conflict-related legacies and persistent root causes of violence in deeply divided society, we encourage the new government of Sri Lanka to work together with all parties concerned to put in place effective international, institutional and legislative measures with the view to democratize Sri Lankan institutions and society. The resolution takes positive note of political will of the new government to cooperate with the international community in addressing gross violation of human rights and international humanitarian law from the past conflicts. On the other hand, it requests the process of reaching reconciliation and accountability to be credible by ensuring that effective transitional justice mechanisms are established and the situation is closely monitored by the Human Rights Council. We hope that in 18 months Sri Lanka will show to the Council that it has seized this historic momentum and has turned its positive political commitments into reality. I thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is the distinguished delegate from the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republic of Macedonia, as a member of the core group, is pleased that the process of negotiation of this resolution led towards consensus. The resolution is designed as a follow-up of the Resolution 25/1 last year, and on the basis of the findings of the reports of the High Commissioner of Human Rights and OICL. It is important to reiterate that the resolution welcomes the initial steps taken by the government of Sri Lanka to advance respect of human rights and to strengthen the processes of accountability and reconciliation, building new institutions, as well as fighting against corruption and abuses of power in the past. The text also addresses concern expressed in the report of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and YSL and endorses the positive engagement of the government of Sri Lanka since January 2015 in their aims to accelerate credible investigation and seeking justice regarding the violation of human rights with appropriate forms of international support, and also formulates the sequences for the next report of the Human Rights Council. As it was mentioned on many occasions in this session, the resolution supports the new government commitments in building new Sri Lanka for the benefit and well-being of all Sri Lankans. At this stage, we would like to stress the importance of fruitful cooperation with all members and observers of the Human Rights Council, as well as the civil society organization, and we would like to thank them for their contributions in preparing the text of the resolution. The Republic of Macedonia is also grateful for the constructive engagement of the Sri Lankan government in this process. For all these reasons, we call all members of the Human Rights Council to support the adoption of this resolution by consensus. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Next speaker is the distinguished delegate from the UK.
Thank you, Mr. President. The United Kingdom is pleased to be among the main sponsors of draft resolution L29, entitled Promoting Reconciliation, Accountability and Human Rights in Sri Lanka. While this is the fourth resolution of this Council with this title, it is the first to have received the co-sponsorship of the Government of Sri Lanka. This is a truly historic development for Sri Lanka and for this Council. I wish to express the United Kingdom's sincere appreciation to the Government of Sri Lanka and to the Sri Lankan delegation in Geneva for their constructive engagement on this text, which has led to the draft resolution we have before us. I'd like to thank other delegations who supported this draft during the negotiation process carried out by the core group. And I wish to express my deep appreciation to the High Commissioner and his OISL team, who produced such a professional and significant report, which has formed the key basis for this resolution. I also wish to pay special tribute to those in civil society who have worked tirelessly over many years to keep the international community engaged on the promotion of human rights, reconciliation and accountability in Sri Lanka. All of the resolutions on Sri Lanka at this Council from 2012 onwards have been inspired by civil society actors inside and outside Sri Lanka. We simply would not have got to this point without the steadfast determination of courageous human rights defenders working in Sri Lanka, often at great personal risk, to ensure the voices of victims were heard. This draft is a testament to their achievements. Mr. President, many difficult challenges lie ahead for Sri Lanka, but we must draw hope and inspiration from the positive changes which have taken place inside the country, and from the clear commitments expressed by the Sri Lankan government this session. As we move forward, it will be essential to work in partnership with Sri Lanka. We stand ready to give our support as Sri Lanka works to implement this resolution and the wider recommendations of the OISL report. We urge others to join us in doing so. We look forward to the adoption of L29 by consensus. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. The next speaker is distinguished delegate from China.
Mr. President, China maintains its consistent position on the question of country-specific resolutions, and we're of the view that human rights issues to be addressed through constructive dialogue and cooperation. We're against the politicization of human rights issues and against the fact that using human rights to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. China takes note of the fact that Sri Lanka has a treaty agreement with regard to draft resolution A/HRC/30/L29. We commend Sri Lanka for its efforts to promote national reconciliation and the building of the rule of law. We hope that the Sri Lanka government will continue to enhance its own capabilities further develop its economy and improve the lives of its people and realize social harmony. And we wish Sri Lanka new progress in the promotion and protection of all human rights of the Sri Lankan people. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Are there any other requests for the floor under general comments we might have overlooked? That seems to be not the case. We shall now hear from the concerned country. Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank all members of this Council as well as observer states for the support that they have extended towards the adoption of the draft resolution A/HRC/30/L29 titled Promotion, Reconciliation, Accountability and Human Rights in Sri Lanka by Consensus. My delegation sees this resolution as a measure of encouraging and inspiring the government of Sri Lanka and the people of Sri Lanka to travel the path it has already begun on the 8th of January to uphold human rights, establish rule of law, end impunity, strengthen democracy and good governance. In a clear departure from the past, when this Council witnessed the Sri Lanka situation as divisive, today the Council is joining my delegation to adopt a resolution by consensus reflecting the common objectives of my country, members of this Council and the larger community of stakeholders in Sri Lanka. This path-breaking outcome is the result of the courageous and confident leadership of President Maithripala Sirisena and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and the commitment of the government and people of Sri Lanka to uphold, promote and protect human rights, both civil and political, as well as economic, social and cultural rights, in a manner that their benefits will reach each and every individual and every community living in Sri Lanka. Mr. President, Sri Lanka is pleased to join as a co-sponsor of this resolution as a further manifestation of Sri Lanka's commitment to implement the provisions of the resolution in a manner that is objective, are shared by the people and all stakeholders in the country for their benefit. We are eager to commence wide-ranging consultations for this purpose as soon as possible in a manner to expand the ownership of its content to all its stakeholders. My delegation looks forward to joining the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights to report the progress made on the ground as requested in the resolution in time to come. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I've been informed by the Secretariat that there are PBIs for this draft proposal. The copies of the statement have been posted on the HRC extranet. I now open the floor for members of the Council who wish to make explanations of vote before the vote on the draft proposal L29. Explanations of vote before the vote. I see South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. President. South Africa welcomes this resolution because by its adoption by consensus will signify a turning point in the relations between the Human Rights Council and the government of Sri Lanka. This is indeed also a turning point for the people of Sri Lanka, particularly the victims of the civil war. South Africa has always promoted the need for a peaceful, sustainable, long-term political solution which will be achieved through broad consultations and an inclusive dialogue process amongst the people of Sri Lanka. In this respect, we have offered to share our experiences on finding a lasting political solution and to develop an organic model for truth-telling, justice and reconciliation with the government in a non-prescriptive manner. Mr. President, South Africa appreciates that the draft resolution before this Council recognizes decisive steps the government of Sri Lanka has taken in the 9 months since it took office towards a process of reconciliation and addressing the domestic challenges of the justice and judicial systems. This is a fact also acknowledged by the OISL and the High Commissioner's reports. South Africa commends the government for the bold steps it has undertaken and the commitment it is showing towards the implementation of the recommendations of the report. While there is recognition of the positive steps taken, the High Commissioner's report also highlights the endemic violations of international human rights law and international humanitarian law, including the lack of credibility in Sri Lanka's domestic mechanism. South Africa believes that the establishment of a credible domestic mechanism on accountability, truth-telling and reconciliation must be underpinned by sincere political dialogue process between all concerned parties, which includes the Sinhalese, Tamil and Muslim communities, to bring about a lasting political solution and the achievement of sustainable peace for the people of Sri Lanka. The Tamil diaspora remains an important constituency and its support is critical in fostering a real and meaningful dialogue. In this respect, South Africa calls for an effective implementation of the constructive recommendations in the report, including the return of private land, missing persons, torture and sexual and gender-based violence. We also call on the government to fulfill its commitment to the devolution of political authority through the 13th Amendment of the Constitution of Sri Lanka and the review of the Victims and Witness Protection Act and Prevention of Terrorism Act. This is an opportunity, Mr. President, for the people of Sri Lanka to resolutely progress towards reconciliation, peace, stability and nation building. These are dependent on credibly investigating the alleged violations of human rights to avoid non-recurrence. In conclusion, Mr. President, South Africa welcomes the collaborative spirit of the resolution between the Government of Sri Lanka and the Office of the High Commissioner, including with the special procedures and mandate holders. We encourage Sri Lanka to continue in this path for the good of its people, cognizant of the challenges ahead and the delicate balance that the government needs to maintain in its pursuit of a lasting peace in the country. What the government and people of Sri Lanka need is support and nurturing by the international community as they embark on this difficult journey. I thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other explanations of vote? Before the vote, I see Ghana. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sri Lanka must be applauded for the courage to accept self-criticism. This Council must continue to uphold its mandate to prevent and address situations everywhere in which gross violations of international human rights and international humanitarian law, such as acts of genocide, crimes against humanity, and ethnic cleansing and war crimes occur, and to fight impunity. In doing so, this Council must strive to strike a reasonable balance between the sovereign principle of non-interference, which underscores the sovereign independence and territorial integrity of member states, on the one hand, and the humanitarian principle of non-indifference, which speaks to the global interdependence, on the other hand, with the ultimate goal of fighting and deterring impunity. That is why Ghana would urge all states to join the consensus in encouraging Sri Lanka on this courageous path of accepting the accountability mechanisms that have been included in the resolution we are about to consider. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other explanation of vote before the vote? That is not the case. Is there a request for a vote on this resolution? That is also not the case. May I take it then that draft proposal L29 may be adopted without a vote? It is so decided. As this resolution is the only one under item 2, we will therefore move to explanations of vote and general comments after the vote on L29 adopted under this agenda item. Are there any delegations wishing to take the floor? India, you have the floor.
Mr. President, my delegation wishes to make this explanation of vote after the vote in connection with the resolution titled Promoting Reconciliation, Accountability and Human Rights in Sri Lanka that was adopted by the Council by consensus under the agenda item 2. The consensus resolution co-sponsored by Sri Lanka underscores the collective desire of Sri Lankans expressed in elections earlier this year for change, reconciliation and unity, and the rejection of extremist voices. Mr. President, as Sri Lanka's closest neighbor, India cannot remain untouched by developments in that country. India has always supported efforts to preserve Sri Lanka's character as a multi-ethnic, multilingual and multi-religious society in which all citizens, including the Sri Lankan Tamil community, can live in equality, safety and harmony and prosper and fulfill their aspirations within a united Sri Lanka. Towards this direction, we reiterate our firm belief that the meaningful devolution of political authority through the implementation of the 13th Amendment of the Constitution of Sri Lanka and building upon it would greatly help the process of national reconciliation in Sri Lanka. In conclusion, we hope that with the sagacity and political will of its leadership and the support of its people, Sri Lanka will achieve genuine reconciliation and development. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Are there any other requests for explanation of vote and general comments after the vote on this item 2? That is not the case. Then we will continue in our agenda.